Hello. Welcome to the Bella Infidelity Stories channel, where we present genuine narratives filled with surprising turns. If you found the video enjoyable, consider subscribing and giving it a thumbs up. It truly contributes to the growth of our channel. Now, let's immerse ourselves in the narrative. For approximately 3 years, I have been employed as a personal driver for Mrs. Katie Harris. She runs a modest yet thriving business. I've got to admit, it's quite a decent arrangement. At 37, I've largely maintained a straightforward life. Following my divorce a few years back, I vowed to steer clear of intricate relationships. I don't have children, and to be honest, I'm perfectly fine with that. I appreciate my independence, my work, and the structure it provides in my life. I have the pleasure of cruising in a lovely vehicle, enjoying podcasts, and embracing a carefree mindset. Katie is, quite frankly, unique. At 48, she carries a certain poise that sets her apart, a grace that makes her feel almost beyond reach, don't you think? We have consistently maintained a professional demeanor. I collect her from meetings, escort her to appointments, and from time to time, handle errands for the company. It's simple, and honestly, I take pleasure in it. The compensation is attractive, the schedule is adaptable, and perhaps most crucially, I can avoid the stress of a traditional 9-to-5 position. That day began just like all the rest. It was a Tuesday, and we followed our regular routine. Retrieve her from the workplace, escort her to a different client meeting, and then return her to her residence. Having engaged in this for an extensive period, it all seemed to flow effortlessly. The journey unfolded effortlessly, with the dialogue flowing easily, filled with the usual light banter about the weather and work. Nothing particularly unusual. However, while we were gliding along the highway, we encountered an obstacle, a colossal gridlock. It was a scene of barely moving vehicles, with flashing lights illuminating the area ahead. We found ourselves in a predicament. The radio continued to report on a significant accident just a few miles ahead, with no estimate provided for when the road might be cleared. "Excellent," I whispered softly, casting a sidelong glance at Katie. She appeared completely unfazed. Katie maintained her composure, exuding a sense of tranquility and poise in every circumstance. After a brief moment of staring at her phone, she shifted her gaze to me, shattering the quiet that hung between us. "It seems we're in this predicament for the time being," she remarked, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "Indeed," I responded. "It appears so." I tweaked the air conditioning and got comfortable in my seat, yet I sensed something was off with Katie today. Typically, she would drift away, glance at emails, or immerse herself in tasks. But today, she appeared more engaged. She adjusted her position, clasping her hands together in her lap, and then, unexpectedly, she began to speak once more. "So, Andrew, share with me how life has unfolded for you since, well, everything happened." I was taken by surprise. Her inquiry into my personal life caught me off guard. Katie had consistently maintained a professional demeanor, never straying into such uncharted waters. I paused briefly, uncertain of how to respond, yet her gaze was fixed on me, filled with genuine curiosity, and I had no intention of dismissing her. "It seems life has been treating me fairly well," I remarked. "I'm no longer in a marriage, if that's what you're implying. It has been a few years since the separation. I tend to keep it to myself." Katie nodded, her eyes reflecting a gentle warmth. "Divorce is challenging," she remarked, her tone soft and understanding. "I understand it's challenging, yet it reveals so much about who you are, doesn't it?" I found myself at a loss for words in response to that. She was indeed correct, but I wasn't prepared to plunge into all the specifics. "Absolutely," I remarked, aiming to maintain a cheerful atmosphere. "It seems that way." A stillness enveloped the room, yet it felt anything but awkward. It was simply unique. Katie reclined in her chair, and for the first time in all our years of collaboration, it seemed as though she transcended the role of just being my superior. She was an individual, someone who grasped the essence of experiencing something intimate, something challenging. After a minute or two, Katie did something that utterly caught me off guard. She released her seatbelt and gracefully moved to the front passenger seat, positioning herself right beside me. "Would you like to discuss it?" she inquired, her gaze locking onto mine. Yet there was an element in her demeanor that seemed gentler, more exposed than what I was accustomed to. I found myself at a loss for how to respond. This was my superior. She was married, for goodness sake. I never meant to overstep any boundaries. Yet there existed an unusual chemistry, a palpable tension, in the atmosphere that I found impossible to overlook. Before I had a chance to gather my thoughts, she moved in closer, and without any preamble, she pressed her lips against mine. A gentle, fleeting kiss, softly resting on my lips for just a moment. I stood still. It wasn't an intense kiss, merely a sudden moment, and to be truthful, I found myself at a loss for thoughts or emotions. My heart pounded, and my thoughts whirled in a chaotic dance. Katie quickly distanced herself, returning to her seat with a swift motion. Apologies slipped from her lips in a hurried whisper, her tone barely above a murmur. I never intended to create an uncomfortable situation. I was at a loss for words. Could this have been an error? Was she merely swept away by the moment? I was completely in the dark. The congestion lingered, and I remained in the vehicle alongside Katie. Yet now, all seemed transformed. All had transformed. The remainder of the journey was undeniably uncomfortable, to put it mildly. My gaze remained fixed on the road ahead, striving to maintain my concentration. Yet the events that had just unfolded lingered in my mind, refusing to be dismissed. Was it truly a kiss? Or had I merely conjured it in my mind? My heart raced, and my palms felt clammy, even as I sat in the driver's seat, striving to maintain an air of normalcy. Katie remained silent. I cast a quick look in her direction, yet she remained fixated on the view outside, her hands perfectly arranged in her lap. The atmosphere in the car was thick with unease, leaving me at a loss for words. How does one even approach a situation like that? Surely you wouldn't go around kissing your boss, would you? Particularly not in that manner, particularly when she is in a marital relationship. Suddenly, without any warning, she began to speak. "Andrew." Her voice carried a softness, tinged with uncertainty. It was evident that she was grappling with her words as well. "I apologize if I made you feel uneasy." I took a deep breath. Her voice snapped me back to the present, and I swiftly focused on the road ahead. "It's fine," I responded, even though I had my doubts about that. She let out a gentle breath, a quiet release of air. Life can be quite intricate at times, you know, and at times you encounter a person who makes you feel as though you can inhale life anew, and I suppose I've been feeling somewhat adrift. Her words lingered in the space between us, laden with significance. I found myself uncertain about how to reply. What was she referring to? Could it be that she was referring to me? She must have been, wouldn't you agree? However, that was illogical. She had a spouse. She held the position of authority over me. I had no desire to add any more complexity to my life. "I don't want to create any awkwardness, Andrew," she continued. Her voice was more steady now. "Yet there are moments when life shifts unexpectedly, catching you off guard." I focus on my breath, striving to maintain a sense of calm within myself. "Katie, She interrupted me, her gaze locking onto mine for the first time since that kiss. "Andrew, I'm not requesting anything. I simply had to express it. I've been keeping this inside for some time, and I wasn't sure how to navigate these emotions," She halted, her lips sealed in contemplation. "There's something unique about you, Andrew. Your kindness, your ability to listen, and your non-judgmental nature mean the world to me." I was at a loss for words as well. Well, she held the position of my superior. She had a spouse. This situation was utterly misguided. Still, there was something in her gaze, a fragility, that made it difficult for me to dismiss her words. We lingered in quietude for a brief moment. The only noise was the sporadic honk of exasperated drivers surrounding us. The vehicles were at a standstill, and the sun started its descent, bathing the inside of the car in a soft golden light. I attempted to find clarity, yet my mind was a whirlwind of scattered thoughts. What was unfolding? What steps should I take? Katie once more shattered the stillness, her voice now softer. "I apologize if I overstepped. I suppose I just needed a listening ear. A person who would accept me without judgment." I couldn't tell if she was attempting to comfort me or if she was truly being vulnerable. Regardless, I found myself at a loss on how to make sense of it all. Thoughts were swirling rapidly in my head. It might be best to concentrate on navigating through this. "Traffic for now," I spoke, my tone sounding somewhat rigid. "We'll sort everything out later." Katie nodded, yet an unmistakable tension lingered in the space between us. She had transformed into someone entirely different from the person I once knew. The assured, capable leader had transformed into a figure who felt more relatable, more genuine. As the minutes dragged on, I sensed the heaviness of her words hanging in the atmosphere. It had transformed beyond a mere kiss. It encompassed all that she had expressed. She was indeed perplexed, but I couldn't overlook the reality that she was also searching for something from me, something more profound than merely a driver. My thoughts swirled endlessly, contemplating the direction this might take. What's even more frustrating? I found myself wavering on the decision to bring it to a halt. A part of me, buried deep within, sensed an irresistible attraction to her. However, I was determined not to allow my personal emotions to disrupt my professional responsibilities. I was unable to. Gradually, the congestion began to dissipate, allowing the vehicle to creep ahead. Yet, the stillness lingered between us. I cast a quick look at Katie, who had returned to gazing out the window, her face a mask of inscrutability. We were nearing our destination, yet I sensed a change in the atmosphere. The kiss, the words exchanged, transformed everything. It had transformed into something far more significant than mere employment. It transcended the mere act of transporting her from one location to another. There was an added weight now, a complexity I wasn't certain I could manage. The future was a mystery, yet one truth stood clear. I had ventured beyond acceptable boundaries, and regardless of my feelings, my life was irrevocably altered. The following days passed in a haze. Each time I arrived to collect Katie for a ride, an undeniable sense of awkwardness lingered in the atmosphere. It had changed now. An unvoiced tension lingered between us, akin to a secret we both understood yet hesitated to express openly. The kiss, the conversation, lingered vividly in my thoughts. Yet, we acted as if all was well. It was necessary for us to do so. I maintained a professional distance, and I have a strong feeling she did as well. Yet those fleeting glances, those serene moments in the car, conveyed so much more than words ever could. It felt as if an unseen force was drawing us nearer despite our awareness that we ought to hold back. Yet I found myself unable to resist. There were moments when I would gaze at her and sense that familiar tug, the one I endeavored to resist. Katie, in contrast, appeared more aloof, more contemplative. It was evident she was grappling with the events that transpired between us. She remained the same leader I had always known, self-assured and commanding. Yet there was a flicker in her gaze, a hint of something protective, and I couldn't help but sensed that it stemmed from my presence. I aimed to maintain a casual tone, steering clear of anything too intimate. She spoke of work, of the company's future ambitions, yet I sensed the gravity of her words with each utterance. It appeared as though she had more to express, yet chose to restrain herself. I held that in high regard. I felt it was important not to force her into a discussion she wasn't prepared for. Yet, I was acutely aware that I could no longer act as if everything remained the same. It certainly had. Then one afternoon, roughly a week after that day in traffic, events took an unforeseen twist. I was taking Katie to her office, as I usually did, when she unexpectedly requested that I hold on for a moment. I remained in the vehicle, uncertain of what lay ahead. She entered the room, and I was left alone with my reflections. A sense of unease washed over me, as if an unseen event loomed just beyond the horizon, waiting to unfold. A short while later, Katie came back, accompanied by someone else. A man clad in a tailored suit trailed behind her as she exited the building. He exuded an air of significance, likely a client or an individual she collaborated with frequently. He wore a smile, yet there was an unsettling quality in the way his gaze lingered on Katie. It was inexplicable, yet it left me with a sense of unease. I attempted to dismiss it, convincing myself it was trivial, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of his gaze lingering on her as they approached the car. "This is Greg," Katie said, introducing him with a relaxed demeanor. "He is among our investors." I extended my hand, striving to maintain my composure, yet an unsettling feeling began to wash over me. Greg's gaze held a certain intensity, as if he possessed knowledge that eluded me. Perhaps it was merely a figment of my mind, yet the entire scenario felt askew. Katie slipped into the car, with Greg trailing closely behind her. I caught a glimpse of Katie as she flashed me a brief smile, yet there was an unmistakable tension in her posture. There was an unmistakable sense of unease, yet the cause eluded me. I ignited the engine, striving to concentrate on the path before me. As we drove along, Greg and Katie delved into a conversation about business, discussing a deal that seemed far beyond my level of understanding. I found myself a bit lost in the terminology they were throwing around, yet it was clear there was an underlying connection among them. It transcended mere professionalism. It held a personal significance as well. The manner in which he gazed at her, the way she reacted to him, it was impossible to overlook. I attempted to clear my mind, concentrating on the path ahead, yet my thoughts continued to swirl uncontrollably. Did Katie have any involvement with him? Could this be her husband? Or could it have been something entirely different? A sense of unease lingered within me, an instinct that I was teetering on the edge of something forbidden. The remainder of the journey was silent. Greg and Katie were deeply engaged in their discussion, while I found myself lost in my own reflections. I found myself feeling like an outsider, merely a chauffeur in the midst of it all. I was completely in the dark about the situation, yet something about it felt off to me. As we arrived at Katie's house, she glanced back at me while stepping out of the car. "I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, Andrew." She spoke, her tone taking on a more formal quality, as if she were attempting to create a barrier between us once more. I nodded, feeling the weight of silence settle around me. She had changed in ways that were unmistakable. Something had shifted, yet I couldn't quite tell if it was merely my perception or if it was connected to Greg. I found myself at a loss for thoughts, yet there was one certainty that remained clear to me. I could no longer maintain the facade that everything was fine. As I drove away, I couldn't help but ponder whether I was merely another element in her intricate existence, a fragment of a puzzle that was never intended for me to decipher. Perhaps I was merely a momentary diversion in her life. Perhaps, just perhaps, this was something beyond my comprehension. Yet, beneath the surface, I understood that I needed to regain control over my life. No matter what was unfolding between us, whether it was genuine or merely a blunder, I refused to allow it to dictate my actions. Determining my position proved to be a more challenging task than I initially anticipated. The subsequent days unfolded in an unusual fog. Each time I collected Katie, my mind spiraled into a whirlwind of thoughts, each of her gestures, every word she spoke, and the way she looked. She had grown more distant, her demeanor chillier than it once was. Yet I couldn't help but observe how she occasionally returned to those fleeting instances of warmth. And that added to the confusion even further. We moved cautiously, each step delicate and uncertain, caught in a web of ambiguity that kept us tethered to the predicament we found ourselves in. The mystery, the embrace, all lingered in an unresolved state, and neither of us dared to bring it up. Rather, we maintained the illusion that everything remained the same, despite the obvious transformations that had occurred. I began to observe how Katie made an effort to maintain a strictly professional tone in our conversations. During our time in the car, the conversation revolved around work, company plans, meetings, and clients. However, her personal inquiries about my life had ceased. A barrier seemed to rise, leaving me uncertain of how to penetrate its confines. Yet, a twist awaited me that I could never have anticipated. It occurred one evening, roughly 2 weeks following that uncomfortable incident in the car. As I drove to collect Katie after a grueling day at work, an unsettling sensation churned in my stomach. There was an elusive quality to the moment, a sense that something was amiss. As I drove into the parking lot of the office building, I noticed her standing outside, engaged in conversation with someone. She appeared altered, preoccupied, nearly overwhelmed. A man accompanied her, but it wasn't Greg this time. This man appeared older, and he didn't resemble anyone she collaborated with. I set the car in place and lingered, allowing her the time to wrap up her discussion. As I observed, a sense of discomfort washed over me. His proximity to her was palpable, while she appeared to absorb his words rather than contribute her own. I attempted to dispel the sensation, yet it remained. As she settled into the car, silence enveloped the space, devoid of any welcome. She effortlessly slipped into the passenger seat, letting out a deep sigh, her fingers tapping anxiously against the upholstery. "Is everything all right?" I inquired, attempting to keep it light, yet the worry in my tone was unmistakable. Katie's gaze met mine, yet there was a fleeting glimmer of an emotion I couldn't decipher in her eyes. "Indeed, it has been quite a lengthy day," she responded, her tone strained. I chose not to inquire any deeper. I thought she would speak when the time was right, but as we drove on, the silence enveloped us, heavy and uneasy. I felt the urge to inquire about the guy, to uncover the truth of the situation, yet I understood the importance of restraint. A sense lingered that she wasn't prepared to open up. Midway through the journey, she glanced over at me. Her expression had shifted, taking on a serious tone, as if she were on the verge of revealing something significant. "Andrew," she began, her voice softer than normal, "I would like to discuss something with you." My pulse raced. The direction of this conversation was uncertain, yet it was clear that it wouldn't unfold without its challenges. She hesitated, evidently selecting her words with great precision. "I've been reflecting deeply on all that transpired between us, and I simply can't continue to act as if it never occurred." A knot formed in my stomach. I was at a loss for words. My thoughts were swirling, and I understood the importance of maintaining my composure to allow her to express whatever she needed to. Yet I could sense that all too familiar, unwelcome tension beginning to surface. "Listen, Andrew," she went on, her voice trembling just a bit. "I am in a marriage. I am part of a family. I cannot allow this, whatever it may be, to progress any further. It was an error. That day I regret kissing you. I ought to have kept things simpler. I fixed my gaze on the path before me, striving to maintain my calm. It was as if a heavy blow had landed squarely in my stomach. It didn't align with my expectations, yet it resonated with my deepest fears. Deep down, I had always sensed that this was too good to be true. What transpired between us was never destined to endure. Yet listening to her voice articulate those words, to hear her acknowledge it, still struck me like a powerful wave breaking upon the shore. "I comprehend," I murmured, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. I found myself at a loss for words. I had a multitude of questions swirling in my mind regarding Greg, her marriage, and our relationship, yet I chose to keep them buried deep within. She had firmly decided, and I had to honor that choice. We traveled in quietude for a stretch. The heaviness of her words lingered in the air, dense and stifling. At last, as we arrived at her home, she glanced at me again. "Andrew," she said. Her voice gentle now. "I apologize. This was never my intention. I trust that you comprehend my perspective." I nodded, managing a smile despite the disconnect I felt inside. "It's all right, Katie, I understand." She offered a faint, melancholic smile before exiting the vehicle. As I observed her approach her door, a peculiar blend of relief and disappointment washed over me. The end had come. In an instant. The secret, the kiss, the quiet moments we shared, they all felt so trivial now. I understood it was for the best. Yet the hollow ache in my stomach suggested it was far more complicated than that. Katie had departed, leaving me burdened by the lingering presence of something that never had the opportunity to truly flourish. As I pulled away, my mind lingered on the events that had just unfolded. Could it have all been a misstep? Was it destined to conclude in this manner all along? I lacked the solutions, yet I was certain of one thing. My existence would be forever altered. A week had passed since that conversation. It has been a week since Katie decisively communicated that our relationship had come to an end. I haven't received any communication from her, nor did I make any attempts to connect. I thought it was the right choice, yet the days seemed to stretch on forever. The burden of all that had transpired loomed large, and despite my efforts to immerse myself in tasks or seek distractions, it lingered persistently in the recesses of my thoughts. She consumed my thoughts endlessly. The kiss, the fleeting moments of connection, the palpable chemistry that lingers in the air. I attempted to move forward, yet the lingering sense of her abrupt departure, with so many things left unresolved, continued to haunt me. That day unfolded just like all the rest. As I sat in the office, my gaze fixed on my phone, I found myself pondering what Katie might be up to. A nagging sense of unease lingered in the air, as if something was amiss. I had anticipated a message, a semblance of closure, yet there was only silence. It felt like I had vanished from her reality entirely. The call came in around mid-afternoon. Her name appearing on the screen caught me off guard. My heart raced with excitement. After all that had transpired, after the chasm she had created between us, what could possibly compel her to reach out now? I responded right away. "Greetings." "Andrew, it's Katie," she murmured, her tone gentle and tentative. "Could you stop by the office? I would like to have a conversation with you." I acted without a moment's pause. "Absolutely. I will arrive in 15 minutes. The journey seemed to stretch on forever. Thoughts were swirling in my head. What was on her mind that she wanted to discuss? Was she reconsidering her decision? Did something occur? The thought of restoring everything to its former state consumed my mind, yet I understood, buried beneath the surface, that such a return was unlikely. Upon my arrival at the office, I noticed her waiting outside. She stood by the door, weariness etched on her face, her expression a mystery. Her lips remained still upon my arrival, yet a glimmer of something danced in her gaze. Remorse? Perhaps, or even a sense of sorrow. "I appreciate your presence," she remarked as I drew near, her tone firm yet laden with weight. Her typical warmth was absent, yet I could feel her effort to maintain her composure. "Is all well?" I inquired, attempting to decipher her thoughts. "You came across differently during our phone conversation." Katie nodded, inhaling deeply. "I want to express my sincere apologies, Andrew, for how everything concluded and for my behavior. That was unwarranted. I acknowledge that it was unjust to you, and I feel remorse for it." A peculiar blend of relief and confusion washed over me. She offered her apologies, recognizing the events that transpired between us. Yet it fell short of my expectations. There were no elaborate displays, no assurances that everything could return to its former state. It was merely an expression of regret, a straightforward acknowledgement of a mistake. Text. "It's all right, Katie," I said, making an effort to maintain a calm tone. "I understand. Your life, your family, those are things I truly respect. I hold no regrets about what transpired between us, yet I grasp the reasons it couldn't come to fruition." Katie's gaze became gentle. She moved in a fraction, her voice soft and almost inaudible. "I never intended to cause you pain, yet I realized I couldn't continue down this path. It was an injustice to both of us. Do you comprehend?" I uttered again, feeling a constriction in my throat. The reality was I didn't completely grasp it. I couldn't grasp the reason behind her kiss, nor could I fathom why she allowed everything to become so entangled. However, I had no intention of engaging in a debate. It was pointless to prolong the situation. We lingered in silence, our gazes locked in a shared understanding. We were both at a loss for words. A sharp ache pierced my heart, as if I were on the verge of losing something precious, something I hadn't realized mattered to me until it began to fade from my grasp. Katie appeared to perceive the same notion. She stepped back, her expression taut as she struggled to contain her feelings. "I sincerely apologize, Andrew. I believe it's time for us to part ways from this point onward. I can no longer continue to give you false hope." Her words struck me with the force of a blow. I was reluctant to listen, unwilling to acknowledge them, yet beneath it all, I recognized their truth. It simply wasn't meant to be. She had resolved her thoughts. I nodded, feeling the weight of silence settle around me. I had grown weary of resisting it. The truth had been laid bare, and retreat was no longer an option. "I wish you the best," I said at last, my voice raspy. "Look after yourself, Katie." Katie cast a final glance my way, her eyes brimming with unvoiced feelings. She turned and walked away slowly and deliberately, as if departing with more than just the words we exchanged. It felt as though she was departing with a fragment of her essence as well. I observed her fade into the building, the door shutting behind her with a sense of finality that rendered everything tangible. And just like that, it came to an end. End of the late-night chats. Time to cherish every second, cease the speculation about what might have transpired. I lingered for a moment, fixated on the door, paralyzed by uncertainty. My heart felt burdened, as if it bore the weight of all that had transpired between us, yet I understood that the moment had come to release my grip. We each had our own journeys to embark on, and it was time to close this chapter. As I strolled back to the car, the biting wind enveloped me, and a significant realization dawned upon me. I had indeed lost something, but I had not lost it all. Life must continue. I had to press on, even if it meant doing so without Katie by my side. With a deep breath, I slid into the car, turned the key and set off, fully aware that this chapter of my journey had come to a close.